Hey everybody, what's up? It's Toady Hawk. Over the past several weeks, there's been a lot of discussion within the Nouniverse about the proposal to convert the legal entity of Nouns from a Cayman Islands foundation into a Wyoming DUNA, a brand new legal construct designed especially for DAOs. Founder of Nouns, Punk4156, kindly agreed to join me and Jack Wilds for a Q&A conversation about the proposal and what it means for the future of Nouns. We hope that this will help all DAO members get up to speed on everything that the proposal entails before on-chain voting starts tomorrow. 4156, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and chat with us about the DUNA. Before we get into that topic, I'm wondering if you can just please give us a quick introduction for those who might not know who you are and what is your role as the founder of Nouns.
Punk4156, standard spiel. I've been in the digital currency space since about 2013, building various things, collecting, investing, etc. Yeah, you used to have a sort of VC-funded startup in the space. At some point, kind of falling very far down the NFT rabbit hole, getting very into CryptoPunks, kind of became very excited about all the possibilities around things that could be built with NFTs. Thought that the sort of space of possibility hadn't been pushed as far as it could be. Threw out this crazy idea on Twitter to build Nouns. And, you know, luckily a bunch of smart people said, hey, sure, let's go and try and build this thing. So, you know, 3 years ago, 10 of us got together in a Discord and kind of cooked up what Nouns was initially, and we put it out on the blockchain, and then the rest is sort of history. Nouns as a thing or an org is this sort of continuously evolving organism. You know, we've seen it kind of go through many different phases or periods or seasons, we sometimes call them, as you know. And yeah, today I think we're sort of on the cusp of another season finale and potentially the launch of a new season, which is the Nouns as DUNA.
Nouns was founded back in 2021. I'm wondering if you can take us back then and talk to us about what your initial vision was for the protocol.
You know, I guess it's very easy to sort of overwrite the past with the present and just trying to put ourselves in our shoes, you know, in our 2021 shoes. I really think we just saw it as a great big experiment that could go in any number of directions. You know, certainly as we were building it, we had no idea that it would kind of snowball like it has. You know, I think I've told this story before, but when we were sort of initially prototyping it and we had the values for the noun options kind of inputted in our mock UIs, I think we were mocking in like 0.1 ETH per noun. And then when we launched the project, you know, it was of course like hundreds of ETH per noun, and we were all sort of in shock. So certainly I think we understood that, you know, kind of cryptocurrency is reflexive and, you know, things can kind of go in very interesting directions. But yeah, I don't think we would have, that we sort of anticipated having Nouns having the kind of impact it has in like the number of different fields that it has. You know, I think, you know, the noun glasses and the meme has actually kind of propagated pretty far in like a whole bunch of different verticals, which I don't think we initially saw as possible.
For those who may not be familiar with the foundation, I'm wondering if you can give us a quick history lesson. When was the foundation established and what kind of organization is it currently?
Yeah, sure. So we established the Nouns Foundation kind of toward the end of the first year the project was launched. We sort of, you know, again, being cryptocurrency and sort of not knowing what might happen, we didn't really have a sense of kind of how significant the project would be. And so it was, I think, probably within the first few weeks after we saw just, you know, how much capital was flowing into this thing, we started to think, well, that this probably needs some sort of like legal entity or real world footprint. You know, we were referred to a big four accounting firm. We referred to William and Watkins, and we just started having conversations with them about, you know, here's this like crazy thing that we built. What is it in the real world? What sort of entity does it need to kind of like protect it and help govern it? And we sort of looked around at all the options at the time and decided that a Cayman Foundation company would probably be the best fit, a sort of like minimum viable product, if you will, for the DAO. Because again, in the early days, like we didn't have any sense of where was this going to go? You know, where would the sort of economic substance accrue? You know, what countries would noun owners be in? Where would people want to make proposals and do things? So that was the initial thinking was let's just set something up as like, you know, an initial container for this project. And then like, you know, we'll take the sort of veto power that we built into the protocol as a failsafe, and we'll transfer it to this organization. And then this organization will have some teeth in some sense to actually kind of like affect change in the project, you know, in a worst case scenario or something goes wrong. And so, yeah, so that's what we set up. And that was a big sort of learning process. We were very lucky to kind of get a great group of people together to serve as board members on the foundation. Really thoughtful people, kind of deep crypto natives. That was certainly one of the objectives. Objectives was like people who wouldn't be tempted to kind of abuse the veto power, who would sort of understand what it would mean to use the veto power. So yeah, we sort of put that board together, got some initial funding from the DAO, and then really tried to be as much as possible, sort of stay out of the DAO's way and really only kind of spring into action if we were needed, or if there was some sort of crisis or some sort of critical decision. Other than that, it seemed clear that the org of Nouns could sort of do so much of what it does on chain that the foundation could really just be in the background, ideally.
And at what point did the board consider that the legal framework that we're currently using might be insufficient?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's been a kind of like a long, slow process, of understanding. I was just thinking about this today, that really Nouns is 3 years old. How long does it take to become an expert in something? Really, none of us are sort of Nouns experts. Those of us who have been here since the beginning probably have the most expertise, but we're all still sort of riding this thing around with training wheels on. We don't fully grok what it is or what it can do. I think you can think about the whole digital currency space in that context. And certainly almost every time the space has kind of gotten ahead of itself and thought that it was further along than it was, bad stuff has happened, right? So it is nice to just keep in mind that all of this is new and we're all still learning. But, over the last 3 years, we have learned some things about nouns, right? Like where most noun owners tend to be located, where most of the interesting proposals are kind of being executed, where most of the future opportunities may exist. So I think that's certainly one facet of it. I think the other facet is that 3 years ago in this space, there was, I think, a real kind of optimism in the sense that if you just sort of had the best intentions and figured things out as you went along, you probably wouldn't get in too much trouble for what you were building. There was a sort of permissiveness around that. And I think that has sort of deteriorated quite a bit over the past few years. I think almost everyone in the space feels it. And so I think the combination of those two things, seeing a lot of the economic substance of the org trending towards being in America, also understanding that the stakes of not getting this right seem to just be continuously increasing, made us think, maybe we need to think about kind of further aligning where Nouns is with what Nouns is doing. And then, really for a long time, there was no viable candidate to replace the foundation. The foundation was the sort of best practice, I guess, initially for this sort of thing. And so when the DUNA construct came into existence, really just a few months ago, we thought, oh, hey, this is something that is both aligned with where Nouns is going and also almost a perfect form of an organization, perfect form of a sort of legal representation of what Nouns is. That was the basis for trying to propose this new construct to be a home for Nouns.
Okay, this brings us nicely into the DUNA. So what is a DUNA? For someone who has no idea, hasn't been following, what exactly is a DUNA and why do you think it's right for Nouns?
So, I mean, in the simplest form, a DUNA is a decentralized, unincorporated, nonprofit association. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a DUNA expert, but in the process of kind of understanding that this would be the best sort of wrapper for Nouns, we consulted with these experts, including some of the people who were actually behind the creation of the entity. Yeah, so it really is a sort of kind of lightweight wrapper for a decentralized organization, like a legal wrapper for a DAO. So some of the nice properties that it has are that there's no sort of there's no CEO, there's no board of directors making decisions. There are literally just administrators, or there's a DUNA administrator, and that administrator is kind of one of their duties is to execute the will of the DAO. Right. And so to the extent that you're sort of, I think at this point in kind of crypto history, forced to have some kind of entity that wraps the DAO, this form of entity is the most kind of closely aligned with all of those crypto native principles. Yeah, it's new. It's kind of purpose made for DAOs. And yeah, it's available for us to kind of add to our Nouns experiment.
Can you quickly run us through the pros and cons of the DUNA as you see it?
I think the way to think about this, and I've been trying to think about how to frame it, is I think Nouns is probably, or really probably any DAO at scale, but certainly Nouns is one of the most prominent DAOs at scale, is at this kind of fork in the road, right? Where the objective is to be as kind of crypto native as possible and to not need any sort of legal wrapper, legal entity. But like in the context of like the real world, it's really not practical to do that. As one of our advisors has told us repeatedly, you can't be a nothing nowhere. You have to be a something somewhere. This is just how the world works. You can imagine kind of two possible futures for nouns. There's the future where we essentially take the hardcore, libertarian crypto native and say, we refuse to establish a legal entity for nouns. Okay. You can imagine the DAO rejects the DUNA proposal. KYC eventually comes to Cayman, and Cayman ends up having a lot of the same obligations that the DUNA will have. In this scenario, presumably the DAO also kind of rejects the foundation. Okay. So now you have this completely kind of entity-less thing that exists only on the internet. Now, because you can't be a nothing nowhere, you have to be a something somewhere. Someone would come along and classify the DAO as something, and that something is probably a general partnership. And in the general partnership, the partners are jointly or severally liable for the actions of the other partners. Then you have this thing where you have all these people that are participating and like they're all kind of potentially on their own liable for the actions of all these other internet strangers. Now you have this further complication that some of them are anonymous and some of them are doxed. Now, what do you think happens in that scenario? Like, who wants to be a doxed individual in a general partnership with a bunch of people on the internet where they're liable for, the actions of like other internet anons? And as we know in the crypto space, as much as we like to think nouns kind of select for people who are well-meaning, there are bad actors out there. And inevitably, you would end up with these folks inside the org. So I think what you have in that scenario is basically the attrition of all doxed participants. And so nouns would end up anon only. And once noun is sort of anon only, it can no longer meaningfully kind of interact with all of like the great brands and charities and like fun props that like we all enjoy. That's what is fun about nouns. And if the DAO can't do that, then it can't support the auctions with this sort of perceived social capital of being a member of the DAO, right? And so if the DAO is now all anons and it can't kind of like do cool props, now it basically needs another way of sort of creating value for its members. And as we've seen hundreds of times over, the obvious, easy, quote unquote, easy way to create value in the crypto space for a bunch of anons is to just like do DeFi degeneracy. So I think like, what I'm trying to do here is paint a picture of what happens to nouns in a scenario where we actually don't have those legal protections that are afforded by either something like a Cayman Foundation or a DUNA. The other possible path here is this path of like, maximizing legitimacy, trying to become this sort of like Coinbase of DAOs, right? Which, yes, it has some level of kind of burdensome compliance obligations, and they're a little bit expensive, and we have to KYC our grants. But I think what we get from that is this sort of like level of legitimacy that lets us interact with, all of these great people that we couldn't interact with before, and potentially lets us kind of scale the project to like another level as a function of that legitimacy. So I actually think the decision here is sort of less about, it is like, like the details of, you don't have to KYC in Cayman, but you do have to KYC in the DUNA, like those sorts of anxieties. And it's much more about sort of like finding the kind of entity that will provide the maximum amount of legitimacy for the project and will let us actually like scale to and like undertake things that we couldn't have possibly had access to before. So for me, I think it's just like a very obvious decision that like, the path forward, certainly for most of crypto at this point, but like certainly for nouns is this path of like maximizing legitimacy, maximizing kind of like playing well with the existing legal infrastructure. And now for the first time, we actually have this like purpose-built construct that lets us do that. So I think it's like a very obvious choice for nouns. And I think those are the sort of like two possible paths forward that you can imagine. And yeah, I think we're probably at this fork in the road where we have like an opportunity to actually like do something that ends up being very consequential and positive for the DAO in the long run.
I'm wondering if you could say a couple words to those in the DAO who might feel like this transition to the DUNA kills the permissionless identity of the protocol in a certain way.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, I think it's difficult to alleviate that anxiety because I think it's true. I mean, that like certainly DAO having to KYC grant recipients makes it less permissionless than it used to be. I think, I don't know if it's any sort of consolation, but my sense is that this sort of compliance will be foisted upon most entities in this space eventually. You can try to delay that as long as possible, or you can go into kind of a non-mode, which I think is just going to have all sorts of associated problems. So yeah, I think, as like someone who's been around the space for a long time and have libertarian leanings, I don't love it, but also putting on my startup founder hat, I think it's just like a practical reality, and it creates tremendous opportunity to scale and take Nouns to a place that it couldn't have gone before. And I think we just have to, take all the good and the bad that we get and kind of like weigh those decisions. I think there certainly is lots of room in the space for these like very hardcore libertarian tornado cash type projects, but that it certainly seems like the stakes are around doing that are increasing all the time. And if that's the path you want to go down, then like you can do it, but I'm not going to do it. And you better be careful. Experiments like Nouns, or if you want to think of it as a startups like Nouns, like these types of organizations are always forced to continuously make existential decisions and very difficult decisions. And Nouns is no different. We're just faced with, as we've been faced with in the past, important decisions and existential decisions. And we just have to think about what we want, and we have to make the right decision. And some people are going to be upset about the decision ultimately, right? You're never going to have sort of 100% of agreement inside of a very sort of diverse entity like Nouns. So yeah, I empathize with that position, but I also think it's a sort of an impractical position at this point.
The DUNA proposal will be up by the time this goes live. I know there's a lot in there to chew on, but just give us a quick summary, let people know exactly what it is and what they should take away from it.
It's a referendum on funding the foundation to continue it's to kind of implement the DUNA research that it has done. So establish the DUNA and then fund the DUNA for its first year of operation. Of course, because the DUNA construct is new, we don't know, perfectly what that first year of operations will entail. We know we have to hire a DUNA administrator. We know there's going to be kind of bookkeeping and filing requirements. DUNAs have to file taxes. They have to pay taxes. They have kind of regulatory requirements, just like any other American entity. Satisfying these requirements cost money. And so, yeah, what we're trying to do here is get a budget together to kind of pay our advisors to continue to advise us on the establishment of the DUNA, to actually implement the establishment of the DUNA, and then to run it for the first year. And again, the way we've constructed this referendum, because DUNA is not an on-chain thing and the proposal can't execute the establishment of the DUNA, we decided that the kind of allocation of capital to the foundation with this specific purpose would be the referendum around does Nouns want to DUNA. The details are there in the proposal. We kind of, because there's just like a lot of detail, we intentionally kind of constructed the whole proposal in point form. Hopefully it's very readable. I would encourage you to go and read through it and hopefully learn some things on the way.
As the founder of Nouns, I'd like to know what excites you the most about the post-DUNA era for Nouns?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, in its current form has still not truly found product market fit, maybe outside of the context of the NFT bubble, right? Where everyone wanted Nouns. It's currently the case that Nouns is going to run out of money if we keep funding proposals and don't sort of like create more demand to join Nouns. I'm excited at all of the sort of like possibilities that the DUNA unlocks, things like the 501c3 or 501c7. These would be registered nonprofit structures that would either make Nouns more tax efficient or potentially even give people incentives for actually purchasing Nouns. What could be exciting would be unlocking new types of flows of capital into the DAO that would give us more scale and let us do more interesting things. And then also, I think there are lots of like super interesting organizations out there that we can partner with. And there are lots of organizations out there that are willing to interact with a nonprofit, but are not willing to interact with a DAO or are not willing to act with like an offshore Cayman entity. And so that sort of like unlock of legitimacy, I think like people aren't excited enough about it. I think Nouns to date has such a portfolio of like amazing stuff that it's done, and brands are so hungry to do interesting things that like we can take the portfolio of all the cool stuff we've done, the sort of like Nouns MVP, if you will, and we can go and show this to huge sort of American corporations that would be willing to interact with the nonprofit. Maybe we can have like partnerships with some of the biggest brands in the world and, really attempt to scale the project to a level that we've always sort of dreamt of. I think to me, those are the two most kind of exciting unlocks. I think probably I haven't done a great job of articulating all of the upsides. And I think it's somewhat fair in the sense that there's so much kind of like technical detail and so many things to consider in this sort of proposal. that it's hard to like be thinking about kind of the marketing side of it. But I think there are some like very obvious upsides, and even things like going out and like directly trying to raise capital into the DAO. Yeah, that sort of unlock of like more kinds of inflows of capital into the DAO, and then just like more scale, more access, more fun, more nounishness. I'm super excited about it. So I do really hope that this passes, and I hope the DAO can kind of come together and get it done. And then I hope we can get back to all the fun stuff and like unlock like 1,000 new amazing things on the other side.
Want to thank you again, 4156, for taking the time to sit down with Jack and I and answer some of these questions. And I hope people watching, both from inside and outside the DAO, find it helpful. I hope that hearing it directly from the horse's mouth, as it were, helps them to understand why the foundation is making this decision, and also gives them an idea about your vision for the future of Nouns. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a million, guys. Cheers.